Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with an expert in the physical and metaphysical, Aureal Williams. She explores the many manifestations of the collective shift to the fifth dimensional consciousness. Her information, coaching, consulting processes, and the downloadable products are the result of 5 decades of ongoing work with this quantum shift. Since her earliest days, she has been spiritually oriented, opting for integral presence, accountability, and life purpose alignment. We get into quite a bit. She's wonderful. Enjoy this interview.
Hi, Aureal. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
What I want to do before we get into your work and your life is I want to know, how did you do over these last 2 years with the COVID lockdown, and how did you change as a result of it?
Joe, first of all, you're such a prolific podcaster. You've really accepted the mission of connecting the world, and I'm so grateful to connect with you and share my story. So thank you. And I'm in the minority about COVID because I loved it. I love the shutdown. I tend to be like a hermit anyway. That's my baseline, and I just loved the silence and the stillness and the isolation. It worked really well for me. But I know that's not the usual response, and it was really hard for people. I get that. But for me, I just loved it, and I went deeper and deeper and deeper into the stillness, which I love it. And I just kind of blossomed from that experience.
You know, first and foremost, thank you so much for the kind words. I'm so glad to be a conduit to get so many good stories and wonderful people on the planet. And I think that's the therapeutic thing of this 21st century mechanism we call as podcasting. There's so many great stories, so many great ways to connect, and I'm just always glad that I have the chance to not only broaden my horizons, but everybody out there that's listening, because you know, with people like you and so many others on this planet, there's so much great stuff going on, and we should all be able to mingle and expand our personal horizons to wrap our brains around it. And you know, it's interesting because not only with, you know, different walks of life that I've spoken with, but, you know, even in the jazz world, overwhelmingly everybody has been positive about this time. Not that it was something that the hardship was something they embraced, but they worked through it. And I think there was a peace and there was a calm. The Venice Canal cleared up, you know, smog cleared up in major cities. A lot of people got a chance to do projects. So I really do think there was a part of this that was a huge silver lining. And the planet, I think, sometimes needs to take a break.
Absolutely. That's right. And one of the benefits that has come from it is this global community, this connection with people we would not have ever connected with before. So the blessings are still coming.
You know, it's interesting. I had just moved. I'm in the Kansas City metro area, so I moved to a little town called Lee Summit, Missouri, and it's actually growing quite a bit. We got there in January of 2020, and it was quite a move. So we get there, and then the world 2 months later shuts down. And I noticed all these people walking around, and I had no real measuring stick because I hadn't lived there that long, and it was wintertime. But everybody was out, and I've heard that from people, even musicians, like in Brooklyn and very heavily populated areas and urban places. And everybody just had this level of connection that they got for a while. And I think that's a part of the global community that's been really positive about this time that we all lived through.
That's right. That's right.
So before we get into your history and your past, I want to know this. If you were transported into the front of a grade school classroom and you were doing career day and one of the kids looked up and said, "What do you do for a living and how are you qualified to do it?" how would you answer that child?
My first response is to say that I would stand in front of that classroom and ask that child to put her right hand at the level of her heart and her left hand below her navel, and to just breathe with me and to open up to that experience of heart connection. And that's what I do. Basically, is help people feel their own heart and connect from there.
That's wonderful. So I'm curious with what you do, you know, before we get into your history, I'm curious, there's so much of you that you have to put out there. There's so much of you that has to reach out and connect with people, and you're helping them. But you also are a person, and you have your own needs and your own id, ego, and superego. How do you satiate both of those? How do you find a balance to keep your life healthy and fulfilled and do the same for others?
Well, Joe, that's a really important question for me because it comes up as I consult with people to help me guide my business and grow my business, and they all tell me that my best option is to share myself more. And first of all, I'm an Aquarian, and I don't know if you or any of your listeners know what that is, but it's a sun sign, an energy, and it's about a humanitarian stuff. And so that the dynamic is Aquarius on one end and Leo on the other. And Leo is about taking the stage, and Aquarius is about sharing the stage. So my challenge is to show more of myself. And really interestingly, my work is always inspired by intuition, and it's just a magical process. I think any creative, that's true for any creative. And just most recently, as I'm doing my work and learning, you know, I'm constantly learning as I'm doing, and I was pulled in more to look at the Earth as a planetary influence in the chart. And in Western astrology, people don't include that really, but it felt like it was really important. And so that is the piece for me, the opposite of Leo, the opposite of Aquarius Leo, is to share more of myself. And, you know, for instance, I met for tea with some people who were helping me, consulting with me, and they said, you have to share more of your story. And it's a real challenge for me because it's not about me, but people have to trust me, so they need to know my story. So that is one of my challenges, is to share more of myself as I offer what I do.
You know, it's interesting. I'm married to a Leo, and I currently live with 3 generations of women that are very spiritually guided and can see things and are really in that realm of things. So I understand all of this in a way that I never thought I would. I mean, I'm almost 50. We actually got married. We've known each other for a long time, but we got married in 2019 and dated for about 3 years before that. So, you know, all of this, I'm really kind of learning as I go along, but, you know, they sense and see and feel things in ways that I just don't.
Well, that's wonderful that you're saying yes to the process of opening up to it. Good for you.
One of my favorite quotes is from the poet Charles Bukowski, who said that we're born geniuses and buried idiots. And I think the problem is that as we get older, we put all of these walls around our brains and minds and all of that. It's the reason why, for instance, in my profession with jazz, you can play jazz for young people, and they're open to it, and they love it, and they move, and they feel it, and it's this feeling, which is something that you incubate throughout your life if you love music, all music, but even with jazz. And I think if you cut yourself off and say, well, that other side doesn't exist, there's not these things that I can't see. If I can't see it, it doesn't exist. I think you inherently put a massive wall around your existence if that's your mentality.
Well, yes, and jazz is all about opening up to what is possible, what wasn't done before, and what is possible. So, yes.
Certainly is. So I'm curious, with your life, with the motivations and as driven as you are, talk to me a little bit about where you were born and raised and kind of what your childhood was like to kind of incubated this way that you've become.
I am born in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm 75, and after all these years, I'm back to my home place, and I've never felt more aligned with being in place. Like I am in place. I'm grounded, and it took me well, it didn't take me 75 years, but it took me 72 years to feel that. Cincinnati is that quote about it happens 20 years later in Cincinnati. It's like, but it's a lovely city. I love it, and it is home. And my upbringing was very parochial, and meaning that it was very sheltered and kind of like not multicultural at all. And so I longed for a bigger world. And when I was 20, I was working for American Airlines at the time, and I transferred. I had 3 requests for transfers, and Boston came in, and I transferred to Boston, and I lived there for 29 years. And Boston was such an intellectually stimulating experience for me. It just opened me up to the world. And so, yeah, my grounding was very solid, but I wanted to reach a wider experience, and I did that.
So speaking of being grounded, who have been heroes or role models for you in your life?
I think my heroes, that's a good question. My heroes have been spiritual, like spiritual teachers who helped me see myself, who helped me know myself. I was for a very long time following a Native American tradition, and from there I went to Tibetan Buddhism, and from there I went to like a nameless kind of thing. So my heroes have always been people who have lived with integrity and with truth, living their lives in truth as the guiding principle.
So if you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now, who would it be? Who would you love to talk to?
Michelle Obama. I think she's a very brave woman, and I think she lives her truth, and she did so well in adjusting with all the challenges. So yeah, her.
That right there, I can put another notch up there. That is the number one answer when I ask that question.
Yes.
It's either her or Barack. Yeah, and one of the reasons why I asked this was at one point, probably 5 months ago, I had forgotten that Bill Clinton was a saxophone player, and I looked into him more, and he actually released an album, or he was a part of an album, and it was when he was given a saxophone in Poland, and he played at some festival there, and I thought, how cool would it be to talk to him, because I've seen him live, and I've just really have always been enamored with his grasp of being able to be in front of people and transform you from one thing to another with words. It's amazing. So,
Joe, I think, looking at your podcast and how many people you talk to, I think you're looking at a mirror when you look at him.
Oh, I appreciate that. I just love it. And I'm so glad that this community reached out to me and allowed me to do this, because I'm just fascinated by the dynamics of how many people are out there. And I do get requests back from people that are like, well, you know what I do, and you have a background in jazz. It's like, yeah, but I'm really broadening out. So anyway, yeah, I appreciate that. And I just love reaching out and seeing the plethora. It's like, it's never ending, like the universe. It's just, there's so much to delve into, and it's always a joy to see that and to hear that. So I'm curious in your life, all of us, the one thing about the pandemic is, we all survived, I think, to a good degree because of art and even spirituality. There's a lot of levels and aspects to the human race that really survived during this time. But I'm talking about like movies and TV and visual arts and music, all of these things. In your life, because we all have artistic moments, whether we're musicians or not musicians or artists or not, what book or album or painting really moved you that you remember, that you hearken to, or you have up in your house to this day?
For me, it's words, and it's the switch in the paradigm, and it's brought forward by the people who were the masters in the Mayan calendar, And it's the switch from the paradigm that time is money to time is art. This is the poetry that guides me, because that's how everything is changing. Where we recognize that the creative process is fluid. It cannot be structured or conditioned by limits.
And that's true wisdom, and that's going to be a part of another question I'm going to ask you here. But that's so profound, and I hear that from so many wise and profound people when you really break it down, like this run and dash for money, which I hope has been put under a microscope more during this COVID time. I think a lot of people really had to dig within and find out what was important. And I think that was one thing I realized when this started. I remember the first morning after, I think it was like March 13th or 14th, I have a special needs son. He's 17. And the two things that he loves the most in life are baseball and school. And they were going to go away inextricably for we had no idea at that point how long. And I remember one morning I sat down, and I always have the radio on, and I could just feel the blood pulsing through my ears, and I just was like, what am I going to do? And I just kept kind of going through all of these things. And ultimately, long story short, what I decided to do was I have a 16-year-old stepdaughter, and then I have a 17-year-old special needs son. They're on different spectrums. She's on a different intellect than he is, but they kind of operate in that teenage realm together. And I thought, I'm going to do my interviews with musicians on speaker at nature parks and while I'm driving so we can get out of the house. And I'm going to expose them to this world that I love so much. And I'm also going to let them hear how positive these people are. And I think that's one of the things that galvanized me in this journey to, like, do more of this. Because these people and their stories and the connection between human to human is so important. And I hope we all realize that. So like what you're saying about art, it's not necessarily about the money. We do need that to live. But if we just focus on art for the art's sake and do it because of that, it's going to be such a better existence that we're going to live.
Yes, Joe. And that's so beautiful. What wisdom as a loving parent that you gifted your children with. And the other piece of this, it's about the creative process. It's about what's ruling us now and how we're living is through creativity. It's not through making money. You know, that's another layer of what that means in the paradigm shift. Time, how we spend time, is no more related to generating the money. It's related to releasing, breathing and living our creative process, whatever that means. And we've seen that with the after effects of COVID, with the great resignation or the quiet resignation. People are coming home to their inner experience of what brings meaning to their life. And it's not through working as a machine, it's through working as a creative being.
Absolutely. It certainly is. So I'm curious, speaking of wisdom, you know, in your life, if you have a dream tonight and you run into your younger version, say in your 20s, and you could give your younger version a piece of advice based on the wisdom that you've accumulated over all these years, and this is by no means a regret question. This is just imparting wisdom on your younger version. What would you tell your younger version?
To just keep at it. Life is a spiral that continues to evolve, and each step, each piece of development takes us to the next, which is brighter and fuller and bigger. So just keep at it. And that every single mistake, every failure brings us closer to the fulfillment of who we are. Just keep at it.
Absolutely. What's been one of the best responses you've gotten from a client? Best fan letter you've ever received?
That I've seen them, that they felt seen and heard and held and encouraged to go forward.
So everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your clients, those that you've met in your life. But ultimately, you live your life. You have a perception of who you are. Who do you think you are?
That's hard because I'm keep changing. I keep evolving. So I feel like who I am is just an unfolding flower. That's hard to pin down. It's like it's not set in stone. I think I inquire and I explore and I'm an adventurer, but it's like not set in stone. It's not, it's still fluid.
That's one of the top answers I get, especially from jazz musicians who are masters of improv and going with the flow. And I totally get it. So if anyone out there wants to know more about you and your services and what you do in your life, where's the best place for them to go?
To my website, it's aurealwilliams.com. It's AUREAL Williams.com. And they can find out about my book. I wrote 5D ordinary descriptions of an extraordinary shift and my different services that I offer.
That's wonderful. Aureal, thank you so much for opening up. Thank you for the kind words. And I'm always so relieved whenever I see the news. I see one version of reality, but I always feel another with what I'm doing with these interviews. And you embody a very positive spirit, putting out a lot of good into the world, and it just reverberates through everything. And that's the best way that we can all believe and hope, is to do that. So I appreciate you taking time to talk about your life and opening up. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity, and your work is phenomenal in connecting all of us, so thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, spirituality, and music around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.